Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we're continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between the Russian Federation and the Ukraine. Now, within the last 48 hours, Anthony Blinken, Secretary of State, United States of America, has declared that Ukraine will become part of NATO. And he said this in absolute terms. Now, part of the ongoing NATO charter is that no third party can deny NATO membership. Now, that third party would be the Russian Federation. Any European nation state can seek to join the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, according to NATO. NATO was designed as a defensive alliance protecting Western Europe against the Soviet Union. That is what it originally was for. Now, in the age of globalism, we have seen that NATO mandate change. And this is where you have to look at the Russian perception. It first started in terms of that mandate, the NATO mandate. It first started to change in 1999 with the North Atlantic Treaty Organization attacking Serbia. The reason the North Atlantic Treaty Organization attacked Serbia, again, Serbia was not threatening any NATO member state. Serbia was not threatening Italy. They were not threatening the Germans. No one. Not the Greeks, the Turks, no one. They were having an internal dispute with Albanians living in Serbian territory in Kosovo. Now, NATO proceeded to articulate that because of alleged ethnic cleansing happening in Kosovo, that was threatening NATO member states. They were arguing that the displacement of refugees would have a destabilizing impact on NATO member states. That's a stretch, but that is what they used as a pretext to attack Serbia. A humanitarian mission, but it had very much the operational tempo, the military operational tempo of regime change. They bombed Serbia for a couple of months and even threatened a ground operation. This was at a time just past the collapse of the Soviet Union. So at that time, the Russian Federation was fairly weak militarily. It did not have the capability, it did not have the economic ability to intervene on behalf of its Serbian allies. Now, that was the first step by NATO in which it became, which some nation states perceive as an aggressive alliance, not a defensive alliance. Again, the Serbians were not threatening any other nation state. It was an internal dispute. Now, fast forward to Libya, the Libyan revolution. Muammar Gaddafi. Obviously, Libya was controlled by an authoritarian dictatorship. Absolutely. And that brought about internal fighting, which morphed into a civil war. Under the guise of humanitarian operations, NATO again decided to intervene on the side of seeking to stabilize Libya. But is that what they were really doing? The operation that NATO launched, that NATO led against the Libyan government at the time, led by Muammar Gaddafi, that operation served very much as a regime change operation. Again, initially, it was spun. The false narrative was it was a humanitarian operation, followed by the actual operation, which was regime change. The military operation conducted by NATO was about regime change. And yes, that ended up leading to the death and overthrow of Gaddafi. And now Libya is in permanent civil strife and turmoil. Permanent civil strife and turmoil. Again, the charter of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization says nothing about initiating a perceived war of aggression against countries in North Africa. Again, not designed for that. But yet, that is what happened. That is what happened. Now, as we watch what is happening in Ukraine, Ukraine is at war, both with itself. I would argue that Ukraine has been in a civil conflict, a civil war, since 2014. That should eliminate the prospects of NATO membership. You cannot join NATO while in a civil war. And whether you agree or not agree, there was serious civil strife happening inside of the Ukraine. Now, furthermore, you now have open war between the Russian Federation and the Ukraine. And yet, Anthony Blinken is talking about allowing allowing Ukraine to join NATO. If Ukraine were to join NATO at this moment, the world would be at war, or rather, Western Europe would be dragged into a conflict with the Russian Federation. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, that would happen. Now, by declaring that Ukraine will become part of NATO, absolutely, that is what Anthony Blinken has stated recently, within the last 48 hours, Ukraine will become part of NATO. That is what he said. Do you think the Russians are going to allow that? If the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, under the guise of a humanitarian mission, can attack a North African country, sovereign country, that is not threatening a NATO member state, if the North Atlantic Treaty Organization can intervene in a civil war or a civil conflict, let me back up, that was not a civil war in Serbia. It was a civil dispute between a very small minority Albanian population in Kosovo rebelling against the Serbian authorities. And Kosovo was rightfully, legally part of Serbia. It's a very strange dichotomy in terms of, if you compare and contrast what happened in Kosovo with Serbia, in which the North Atlantic Treaty Organization came to the aid of this little enclave in Serbia, but at the same time, essentially the same thing is happening in eastern Ukraine. In eastern Ukraine, it's very, very similar. You have an unhappy portion of the population in eastern Ukraine, Donetsk, Luhansk, that has rebelled, in which they perceive the reason why they are rebelling is they see an unlawful government in Kiev. Same as what happened in Kosovo. But you have a double standard. In this case, NATO is supporting the regime in Kiev. Whereas in Serbia, they supported those who were rebelling, not the regime in Belgrade. Interesting, isn't it? How one side can pick and choose what they do. And again, the biggest concern is, where does this lead? Because the Russian Federation is not going to allow Ukraine to join NATO. Especially, again, because of recent activities by NATO. It has proven itself that it will operate outside the realm of its stated reasons for existence. So if civil strife were to happen in Russia, Belarus, and having a military platform to operate from in, say, Western Ukraine, what would prevent a North Atlantic Treaty Organization operation, say, inside of Belarus? And that's the Russian concern. But besides that, the sheer hypocrisy is absolute. Again, compare and contrast what happened in Serbia and NATO coming to the aid of the Albanians in Kosovo versus what is happening in eastern Ukraine and the North Atlantic Treaty Organization completely taking hands off of what happened in eastern Ukraine and supporting the Ukrainian government. It's insanity. And it's not abiding by even the charter within the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It's a big stretch. And that's the way the Russians see things. And you can't deny that there is hypocrisy. You cannot deny that the North Atlantic Treaty Organization's stated objective is the defense of Western Europe. And yet, they have conducted these two very large military operations outside of the purview, of the perceived purview of NATO. And there you have it. And the Russians have drawn a red line, and they have stated that we are willing to go to war to prevent this from happening. You've gotten too close. You, NATO, have grown and grown and grown. You are now on our borders. You've encroached not just into Eastern Europe, but you have encroached into actual former Soviet republics, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. And in all probability, as far as NATO is concerned, Belarus would be next. What you will probably see is some sort of revolutionary sponsored activity taking place in Belarus. And then in all probability, from the Russian perception, is a move then to destabilize Russia. And Russia is saying, nope, not going to happen. This ends. And here we are. So with Blinken's statement, this war is going to continue and will probably escalate dramatically. With that statement, Russia is now probably changing what it needs to do in terms of strategic outcomes. Where Russia may have accepted some sort of Ukrainian state, with that statement from Blinken, that may have just changed. And the end game for Russia could be right now much different than what it was at the start of the conflict. Tell me what you think. More to come, as always. Have a good day.